We got to be really careful about who we listen to and what we listen to, because there's so many opinions out there. We need to be very careful. We need to think for ourselves on some of this stuff and not get caught up in all the social media dialogue and debate.
Today, Allan Crockett returns as our guest as we work through how to handle all the noise that we deal with on a daily basis. Things like politics, industry infighting, social media, or the markets. It's easy to get overwhelmed and begin to drift off center. Today, we're going to step back a bit, not to ignore what's happening around us, but to refocus on what matters and think about what we can control versus what we can't control.
So I look at the three things that we can control: the weather, the government, or politics, and the market, versus the three things that we can control: our attitude, the decisions we make, and our habits.
But there's another layer to this, and it has to do with the stories we tell ourselves, especially when stress and uncertainty start creeping in.
Most of the time, negativity can be traced back to unprocessed fear. We're scared about something, or we're stressed about something, and that creates negativity.
Today, we're talking about how to reset, how to think clearly, and how to make intentional decisions for the year ahead. So let's dig in as we continue our conversation with business coach, consultant, and author Allan Crockett on today's episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hi, everyone. This is the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills, your host, and thank you for tuning in and joining us on our program today. And as you heard there in the opening, Allan Crockett is back with us here again today. And if you are a regular listener to the Working Ranch Radio Show, well, you know that we've had Allan on. Usually have him on a couple times a year. Always some of the top shows when we do our recap at the end of the year of all of our top shows. Usually those that he is on joining us for usually end up on that list one way or the other, and so he will be with us today. Now, speaking of those top shows for 2025, we will be doing that the last two shows of this year, so be listening in for that later on here this month, as we'll be recapping some of our top shows, as well as highlighting some of our other shows and topics that we had throughout the year. Folks have always enjoyed that, mainly because maybe you missed a show and you weren't able to catch everything, and it kind of jogs a memory. Hey, maybe go back and listen to that, which, by the way, you can find all of our shows by going to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com. And I know for a lot of you, if you have your own podcast that you listen to from other folks, you probably already have a podcast provider: Spotify, Pandora, Apple, whatever that might be. We're there. Or I can do this to you. I can mess with your phone a little bit. For those of you that have a Droid phone, I'm going to do this to say, okay, Google, search Working Ranch Radio Show. And for all of those of you with an Android phone, my guess is your phone might have taken off if you got things set right. I could probably do that for those of you with an iPhone as well by just contacting Siri. But you can do it. There's a lot of different ways you can find all of our shows out there. And really what we do strive for is to put out shows on a regular basis that are what we would call evergreen. That mean they have some life, that they're just not topics that are going to be old the day that it airs. Yeah, occasionally we'll do some shows on markets. I think that's important that we do that and be looking ahead at where the markets are going to be going. But for the most part, they're going to be on topics that are relevant for any of us here in the ranching industry. Now, speaking of something else that is relevant for any of us in the ranching industry, and that is the Working Ranch magazine. In fact, I've been able to get through most of my latest issue. It is the November-December issue of Working Ranch magazine. And if you don't have a subscription to it, you can get it started by going to workingranchmag.com. And might I suggest, this is not a bad Christmas gift idea either for somebody, is to buy them a subscription to Working Ranch magazine. Something to think about in that. Now, something else that I want to point out too, and that is the Working Ranch magazine is an awful good resource for upcoming bull sales that'll be taking place across the country. And as we see the next issue will be coming out, we'll be really focusing on some of those spring sales. But already in this issue, we've seen several good production sales taking place, but we do have a couple that's coming up. In fact, last week, if you joined us on our program, we talked with Tim and Rick Marlette. They're out of TK Angus. Their 43rd bull bull and female production sales coming up on the 15th of December. And I know for a lot of you folks, you're going to be listening from all different parts of the country. But if you'd like to see what they have to offer and the genetics that they have, you can go to their website at tkangus.com. You can download that catalog, take a look there. And if you are interested, that sale will be on DV Auction. And again, that is December 15th starting at 11:30, and that will be Central Time. Now, as I mentioned before, if you do want to get a subscription, go to the website at workingranchmag.com and you can get it started today. Or another easy way, stop by your local Tractor Supply store and pick one up right there off the shelf. And a shout out today to the Tractor Supply store in Raton, New Mexico, in Rindge, New Hampshire, in Seguin, Texas, and in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Raising and feeding cattle is a high-stakes game. Respiratory disease only raises the risks. Choosing Resflor Gold, Florfenicol, and Flunixin Meglamine from Merck Animal Health as your BRD treatment helps shift the odds. The fast-acting dual therapy reduces fever and fights infection at the source for visible recovery within 6 hours. Don't gamble with BRD. Bet on gold. Learn more at resflorgold.com. Animals intended for human consumption must not be slaughtered within 38 days of treatment. This product is not approved for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older, including dry dairy cows.
Well, let's turn towards our subject at hand here today, and standing by is our guest, Allan Crockett. As I introduced earlier, he is a business coach, consultant for ranches, and now an author, as we'll talk about that later on in the show. But a lot of times when I have the opportunity, when we get the opportunity to visit with Allan, it's usually things that are kind of a little bit more reflective or self-reflecting and thinking, thought-provoking, and I hope today's show does that as well for you. Allan, always good to visit with you and glad to have you on our program here today.
Good to be back with you, Justin. I always appreciate the time we spend together here.
I do too. And one of the things, as I talked to you as we were lining up our conversation that we're going to have here today, to kind of let people know where it sort of stemmed from, a lot of it had to do with what we're going to get through here today, and some of it stemming back to the idea that there's been an awful lot of news in our industry, not just in our cattle industry or ranching industry, but just in the world, whether it's politics and a lot of things going on. And as we approach the end of the year, it just feels like my tank is full and overflowing of BS. Is that the best way to put that? And it's just, there's just so much noise and just so much stuff in our industry that I think I just didn't want to come back and have another show as we wrap up this year on just talking markets and talking that kind of stuff. And there's just so much noise in our lives today, isn't there?
Yeah, that's really true. And you say that, and I'm reminded of the Charles Dickens quote from The Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. And that's kind of where it seems like we are today. You know, on one hand, things look really, really good. And then depending on who you listen to, things are really, really bad. And so I think we got to be really careful about who we listen to and what we listen to, because there's so many opinions out there, and that's all they are, is opinions. They're not fact. They're not based on facts. They're stories that people are telling, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but we need to be very careful. We need to think for ourselves on some of this stuff and not get caught up in all the social media dialogue and debate and things that are going on there.
Mm-hmm. As you and I were talking, and you brought up there with the ability of where we've seen our society gravitate towards everybody basically having the ability to have their voice out there through social media, the ability to express opinions. And opinions are kind of like belly buttons. Everyone has one, and they usually stink. And with that in mind, I mean, it's everybody having that ability to just put it out there. And I feel like that with that ability, there's no then accountability for what is being said out there. And as you had said, we really do need to be cognizant of who we're listening to, because if we just sit there and take everything in, as I feel like right now, I look at over the past 3 to 4 weeks to 6 weeks of all the information and news in the markets and the cattle industry, it just gets tiresome.
It really does, and it can get really depressing, because I think that's the step after tiresome is, you know, we get tired and we hear all this stuff and it drains us, wears us down, and then then we become depressed over what we're hearing. And that's no way to live lives, especially as blessed as we are in this industry to be able to do the things that we want to do. We don't need depression. We don't need tiresome. We don't need to be weighted down. We need to be optimistic. And being optimistic is different than, having your head buried in the sand and not knowing what's going on. But it's a choice. And I think that's what it comes down to, is we can choose to get caught up in the negativity and other people's opinions, or we can choose to develop our own opinions. And hopefully we base our own opinions on fact and not on other people's opinions. And we are cognizant about making those choices. It's interesting. It's been a few years ago now, but a friend of mine shared with me his son had gone through a nasty divorce, and there were all kinds of problems and things involved in that. And his dad told me that he told him, he says, "That's just the way I am, Dad. That's the way I'm wired." And I'm just listening, he was kind of venting and needed somebody to listen. So I just listened. I didn't make any comments. But the comment that went through my mind, or the thought that went through my mind, is, no, that's not just the way you are. That's the way you choose to be, because it's a choice. And mindset is a choice, and identity is a choice. Where we choose to put our attention and our focus is a choice. And so we need to be very, very careful about, attention it's such a valuable asset to us, our mindset and the attention, where we focus, that if we're not careful, somebody will steal that focus from us. Social media, or the sale barn, or the coffee shop, or, there's all kinds. The evening news can steal our attention. And so we have to be very, very careful about that and realize that we are making choices. And even if we don't do anything, we're choosing not to do anything. So it's still a choice. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very, very careful there. And I think part of that, Justin, is we need to understand that personality is not permanent. We can choose to get out of bed happy in the morning versus getting out grumpy. Well, I'm not a morning person, I'm just grumpy in the morning, and give me till about 11 o'clock or noon and I'll get happy. That's a choice. Mm-hmm. We don't have to choose to be grumpy in the morning. We can choose to get out of bed and be happy. And so I think so much of it, we get caught up in our identity and who we are and what we are, maybe more what we are than who we are. And then we get weighted down with all the politics and the news and the interpretation of the news and people's opinions on the news. It used to be the news was facts. Here's the facts. And now it's opinion after opinion with a little bit of fact mixed in. And it is mixed in, and sometimes even mixed so well it's incognito in the news. Can't even tell what the fact is. And so we need to be very careful about that and realize that our personality is not permanent. Our identity is not permanent. We can choose where we focus and where we put our attention. Our mindset is full of choices. We can choose how we want our mindset to be. So I think that's the thing we need to understand, is it's a choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was kind of when you and I talked as we were lining this up. I said, there's a lot of things we're hearing basically in our industry right now, and it's news, good, bad, or indifferent. Some of it, a lot of it, maybe a majority of it is stuff we really can't control. It's beyond our control. And we focus on it, as you had said, we focus on it so much that it causes us stress, whether it's a mindset where we're dealing with all of that. When on the other side of things, there are things, though, that we can control, as you were saying, our mindset, where we put our attention, our identity, and those kinds of things. And, that's the thing. I think we spend so much time struggling over the things we really can't control.
Yeah, and if you take that a step further, the market the way it is, and politics and weather, those are the three famous things that we're great about complaining about or whining about, or being happy about, because it rained or, whatever. The market's good. We don't have any control over that. So why waste our mental energy in that negative side of things? The things that we can control our attitude. We absolutely can't if our mindset is, I am going to control my attitude. You can control it. I can control mine. And that leads to us making better decisions. So we can control the decisions we make, and the decisions can become habits. And so I look at the three things that we can control: the weather, the government, or politics, and the market, versus the three things that we can control: our attitude, the decisions we make, and our habits. And those are the things we ought to really be focusing on. And sometimes, quite frankly, we just need to eliminate some of the other stuff, the noise out there. Just shut it off and don't get caught up in it. I had a friend here, it's probably 6 months ago. I just asked him, hey, did you hear such and such? And something was on the news. He's, no, I quit watching the news. All it did is make me mad. Well, that's a good decision. If the news makes you mad, then don't watch the news. But at the same time, we need to be aware of what's going on in the world around us to some degree or another, because our businesses and our lives are affected somehow from that. The market right now, there are people today that are probably profitable for the first time or maybe the second year in 20 or 30 years. They're actually making a profit. And it's strictly the market. It has nothing to do with them and the way they manage the ranch or their business. It's just the market. So I would be looking at that, especially this time of year, at the end of the year, and say, okay, here's where we set. Here's how much money we've made. What are we going to do? What's our plan going forward? And I don't even begin to pretend to be able to predict what this market's going to do. I know you've had some pretty intelligent people on the show that talk about market. They understand that way better than I do. And they're talking this thing's going to be up for another year. Well, that's great if it is, but what if it's not? And so I think some of our planning, we need to have a plan. We need to plan going forward into the next year. But at the same time, we need to not plan on these prices lasting forever.
Mm-hmm. All right, Allan, let's take a break here. When we come back, I want to talk about the voids in life and how do we deal with that as we continue talking about kind of wrapping up this year and how do we center ourselves and refocus as we prepare for 2026 ahead of us. And so we're going to continue on when we come back here on the program.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone calf catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone calf catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
It all starts with a tag. Identifying each animal allows you to better manage the entire herd and control your operation's future. For nearly 70 years, producers have chosen Allflex for individual animal management. With Allflex, you get the most trusted portfolio of ID solutions. Whether you need stock or custom visual tags, electronic tags, tissue sampling units for DNA collection, or syringes, bring the Allflex advantage to your operation today. Visit allflexusa.com to learn more.
All right, Allan, as we move to kind of the next thing that we wanted to talk about, as you were setting this up with me, a lot of us in ranching, we know that when it comes to pasture management or land management, when there's a bare ground out there, that nature's going to try to do something to fill that bare ground in if it possibly can. That has a lot of similarities to our own lives. I want you to expand and explain that a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. Nature will try to fill that in because nature does not like to have bare ground out there. And a lot of people will call those things that come in that bare ground weeds, but for those of us that know better, we'll call them forbs because some of those can be pretty nutritious for animals, and some of them can be poisonous too, so we have to be careful there. But I think in our own lives, we have experienced voids and we will experience voids. When your son goes off to college and all of a sudden you feel like your right arm just got cut off because he did so much to help out around the place, or your dad or your mother dies, or a spouse or a child or a grandchild. I mean, there's a void created anytime something like that happens. And those are extremes, but there's other things that happen that are smaller that just create voids. And anytime there's a void in our lives, something's going to try to fill that space. And it will either be filled with noise that we were talking about in the previous section, the negativity that's out there, or we can choose to eliminate that and we can choose to fill it with good things. And that takes design rather than just being filled by default, because it will get filled by default, just like the so-called weeds will come into a void or bare ground out in the pasture. It's just part of nature. Nature does not like voids, and it will try to fill that. And so in our lives, we have to be careful about that. there's so many things that we can do with that. I remember one time I was on a ranch up in British Columbia, Canada, and it was a huge ranch, like 400 and something thousand acres. And we're driving around a piece of it, and we're talking about the grass and the soil. And, and every once in a while we'd stop and get out and look. And we're talking as we're driving. And I keep asking questions. And the guys with the rancher, he got a little bit frustrated with me. And I sensed his frustration. I didn't want to push him too far, but I wanted him to come to a certain realization. And he made the comment, he said, that's all that this soil will produce. And he said it real forcefully. And so I just kind of backed off for a 10 or 15 seconds. And I called him by name and I said, so what you're telling me is that you can't change the biology in the soil here. You can't increase the organic matter. You can't make this soil healthier than what it is right now. It's just what it is. And then I stopped and there was dead silence and he kept driving and, it seemed like a long time. It's probably 15 seconds and he stopped the truck and he looked over at me and he says, I get it. And so I think that's what we're after is let's get it and let's realize that the noise out there, if there's a void in our life and we're not careful, that noise will fill that void. And the bottom line, Justin, is we become like those with whom we associate with. And, 20 years ago, that pretty much meant, our family and our friends. We're going to become like them because that's who we associate with. But in today's world with media all around us 24/7 and all these opinions being voiced, we will become like those with whom we associate with, not just face to face, but also from the news, from social media, from any kind of outlet like that. We have to, the sale barn, the coffee shop, we will become like the people we associate with. So if we're running around with a bunch of people that are negative, and when I say running around, I'm talking about looking at your phone and looking at social media while you're sitting on your horse, or in the evenings, where you're spending your time, we will become like those people that we associate with. And so if we are associating with the negative people out there, and I think the negative people are the minority by a long shot, but they're a very vocal minority. And so their voices get heard and we can get sucked into that void, or we can allow a void in our lives, allow that vacuum to pull that in, that negativity and that noise, if we're not very intentional about who we listen to and what we listen to and who we associate with and what we associate with.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned that, I couldn't help but think a little bit that the examples you talked about with the guy out of British Columbia, it's sort of tied together a little bit of your story or analogy that you used earlier with your friend and talking about the young man that said, well, that's who I am, and accepting that. And I think accepting the fact that that's what it is and not accepting that it could change becomes an excuse that really is going to be quite hampering to us.
Yeah, we become a victim then. We become a victim of our own mindset. That's just the way I am, Dad. I'm wired that way, or this is just the way I live my life. This is who I am. This is what I am. And as if we didn't have any choice to change that. And from some of my past work that we've talked about, people that say, well, I'm a cow-calf operator and I've got 6 foot of snow in the wintertime. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, that's what we are. That's what we do. We're cow-calf people. Well, that's a choice. It's a choice to have cattle on the ranch year-round in that kind of weather. And we can choose to change that. We can choose to be seasonal operators. We could choose, to be a yearling operator instead of a cow-calf operator. We're not bound and tied into anything. And we need to realize that. And going back to the noise, years ago when computers first came out and they first started becoming affordable for, a household to have one computer. Mm-hmm. We have 10 of them in the household, but back then there was the old giggle, garbage in, garbage out. And I think the same thing applies to our minds and who we are. If we let garbage in, then that garbage is going to be reflected on the outside through the way that we talk, our attitudes, the way we live, the decisions we make. And so the garbage that's coming in from social media, all the noise out there, we have to have a really strong filter. And if we can't put up a strong enough filter, then just shut it off. And I think one of the things that I found really helpful in my life, and I know other people have too, it's just a gratitude journal. just writing things that you're grateful for. And I know a lot of people, that keep a journal. They'll write in the evening. I like to write in the mornings, and it starts my day off right. Here's some things I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that I get to be on, the Working Ranch radio show with Justin today. And I'm grateful, for my wife. I'm grateful for the weather we're having today. I'm grateful that it rained finally, and it was a little bit late, but we got some, so just being grateful. I'm grateful I get to go saddle up a horse today and go check cows, and being grateful for the things that we have. And so again, I think gratitude, people that have positive attitudes and have gratitude in their lives, they really feel gratitude. They don't get sick as often as other people. And when they do, they recover quicker if you have a positive attitude and are grateful. So again, it's not a bury your head in the sand kind of optimism. It's really a strategy that strategically, I'm optimistic, and strategically my mind is that, the market's going to go down. So what? We're going to be on top of our program and our business. And when it goes down, it's not going to hurt us. Yeah, we may not make quite as much money, but we've got a strategic plan and we know what we're doing, so we're going to stay on top of it. And I think that's the thing that we need to be aware of there.
Yeah. All right, let's take another break here. When we come back, what we just were talking about sort of leads into the next thing, and that is looking at, what are we telling ourselves? We have to be careful what we're telling ourselves and how that transpires out and how that's carried out through what we do. Are we reacting, responding, all of those kinds of things that kind of come into context with that. So we're going to get into that when we come back here. In a world of variables that are beyond our control, there's a tool that can provide certainty for your breeding program. I'm talking about Identity Beef. It's the first genomic profile designed for crossbred commercial cattle. Now, here's a tool that's going to utilize DNA to rank the genetic merit for 17 key traits, from maternal to performance to carcass traits, as well as mitigate risk factors, for example, like congestive heart failure. It's time to take the gamble and the waiting game out of your breeding program. Make accurate decisions with confidence and uncover your herd's potential with Identity Beef. To learn more, contact your Neogen representative today or visit neogen.com/identity-beef.
It's more than a convention. It's where the cattle industry comes together. CattleCon 2026 is heading to downtown Nashville, February 3rd through February 5th. Gain insights from top cattle industry experts, connect with fellow producers, and take part in shaping the future of our business. Plus, world-class entertainment and inspiring keynote speakers. Whether you're there for the business, the education, or the good times, CattleCon is where it all comes together. Register today at convention.ncda.org.
Okay, Allan, as we sort of wrap up our conversation here today, I think as we look at this and we bring all of this into some context and hit this last point, one of the things as we were going through this is looking and being very careful about the stories that we are telling ourselves, just in our own mind, what's replaying in our mind over and over that has a tendency to control our outlook on what we're doing. It's much similar to kind of some of the things that we've talked about, but expand on that a little bit, and then we can go through some questions on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned my book. There's a chapter in there that talks about the stories we tell ourselves, and I won't tell the story that's in the book because it's too long for what we're doing here, but in a lot of the workshops I do, I'll ask the question, your spouse is late coming home, should have been home an hour ago, not answering the phone, doesn't respond to a text message. What goes through your mind? And I remember one lady said, well, he's probably in the bar ditch someplace. And somebody else is, or in the bar. One of the
I was going to say, or in the bar.
And so, but we start telling ourselves stories, and we do it with the market, we do it with politics, we do it with our business, the weather. We just tell ourselves stories about all kinds of things. Our kids, supposed to have been home at 11, and it's midnight, and they're not home yet, not answering their cell phone. And what's going on? Where are they at? And we start telling ourselves stories. And sometimes we even tell ourselves positive stories, but it's still a story because there's no fact behind it. And so I think we have to be very careful about that. And especially when we start telling negative stories or looking at our world in a negative response, most of the time, negativity can be traced back to unprocessed fear. We're scared about something or we're stressed about something, and that creates negativity. And if we'll just sit down and process that, this fear that we have, and it could be the market's going to crash. It could be that, the tariffs go away and they flood the country with beef and the market crash. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we could start telling ourselves stories about. None of it's fact. We don't know that. And so we're fearful of that. And let's process that fear, but let's process it in such a way that, okay, here's this potential outcome. And here's another outcome. This could happen. That could happen. And let's pick 3 or 4 of those that are higher probabilities, and then let's make a plan for those. Mm-hmm. All right. If this happens, what are we going to do strategically? And let's make the plan now while we're not emotionally caught up in something that's happened. And that's hard when we're negative or we're around negativity because we can't process when we're fearful. Mm-hmm. So process the fear, set it down and write it down on paper, put it on a whiteboard, on a flip chart. You got a whiteboard on the wall, or I got one right there on my wall. Write it down and let's process, why am I scared about that? What is the fear behind this? And a lot of times when we really get it processed, we'll realize, hey, that wasn't that big a deal after all. It wasn't a big deal. And you know this, Justin, when livestock are stressed, they don't handle well, they don't perform well, they don't gain well, they don't milk well, they get sick, and on and on and on. Well, we are exactly the same. When we are stressed, and fear will cause stress, negativity causes stress. When we're stressed, we're going to see things pop up in our lives. Man, I got a dang headache. I haven't had a headache in forever, and I've got a headache, or we're catching every little flu bug that comes by. And we've gone years and not had the flu, and now all of a sudden we're getting sick all the time. Well, a lot of that is because our body is stressed. We're not resting well at night. We're not eating well because we're stressed. We're eating stress food that's not healthy for us, if you can even call it food. We're eating junk. And so I think we need to recognize that and just address it. Steve Chandler said one time, and he'd been a mentor of mine years ago, but worry is a misuse of imagination. And so when we're worried about things, we're misusing our imagination, and let's figure this out. And our future can be whatever we want it to be. It doesn't have to be what our past has been. We can choose to create a future that we want. And yeah, things can be hard and they can be tough, but at the same time, we can still make good decisions.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you said a little bit ago, and I think this ties a lot of our conversation up here just all together in one way, was processing our fear. And when I think about that, as I was writing notes down here, I was thinking, as you said, why is that something that, identifying why is it? I think another thing is, what can I do about it? And back to our previous segment that we talked about, the voids, filling the voids, I think that if we don't purposely try to actively process that fear, and we do it through just taking in more, I'm going to just say junk, because I think a lot of it is that's on social media that we're hearing from other people's opinions that they're not being held accountable for. And we just put that in there. That's like the weeds coming in on that bare ground versus something that you purposely put in on that bare ground. And it all comes back to, I think, tying everything that we had to, from choices that we talked about in the first segment, to how do we fill in that bare ground, to what are we telling ourselves, all comes from looking at how do we process this fear. Because the other thing that, as we were talking about this, Zach Williams sings a song called "Fear is a Liar." And I think if we understand that if we see stuff on social media that continues to preach fear, think about that. If fear is a liar, and they continue to use that as a mechanism to motivate people, you're being lied to.
Absolutely. And we talked earlier, there's been lots of lies told to us over the years, and then there's that echo of the lie that just keeps getting repeated over and over and over again. And so on social media, somebody tells a lie and somebody else thinks it's fact and repeats it, and somebody else repeats it again, and then we have this echo of this lie that just keeps going and going and going and going, and it's hard to stop. Here's an example, and the example is that red meat causes heart disease, and that is a lie that was started back in the 70s, and we're still hearing the echo of that today, and yet scientifically there is zero proof that that's correct, and actually it's the opposite. if we eat red meat, we're going to be healthier. And all of us in this industry ought to be grateful for that. But it's that echo of the lie that just keeps filtering through there. And if we're not careful, we'll start believing the lies. And because it's told enough times, it's been said that a good liar believes his own lie because he said it so many times. And so we have to be really careful there. And you have the perfect system in place to give you the results you're getting. And if you don't like the results, you need to change the system. And whether that's your physical health, your spiritual health, the emotional relationships, you have the perfect system in place to give you the results that you're getting in your marriage, that you're getting in your family, that you're getting with your neighbors, that you're getting on your grass and your soil, your livestock. You have the perfect system to give you the exact results you're getting. So if you don't like those results, you got to change the system. And I think that's where the future can look really, really bright for any and all of us, in spite of everything that's going on out there. Change is inevitable, and we can fight the change, we can go along with the change, or we can choose to control the direction of the change. And I think that's when our lives and our businesses really open up to possibilities, when we start saying, okay, I'm going to control this, and I'm going to take charge of it. It's my life. It's my business. I'm no longer going to be a victim and woe is me because of the market or because of politics or because of the weather. I'm going to control my attitude. I'm going to control my decisions and my habits and my beliefs. And I'm going to filter out all this other information. And if we do that, I think the future is as bright as it could be for anybody, especially in our industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, before you leave here today, Allan, I did want to take a quick minute here to talk a little bit about your book that just came out, Beyond Business Success After the Exit, What's Next? And give us a brief outline of what this book entails.
What I've done in the book, there's 17 chapters in the book, and all except the last chapter, there is an experience that I share that I've had with working with people. And the names and the places have been changed to protect, the confidentiality of the clients and that. But I tell a story or an experience, I share that experience, and then there's a principle behind it, and I share that principle, and then I take that and apply it to, okay, what's next after business, and how does that apply to us? And this started in my mind several years ago, because you and I both know, and we've known several people that are 80 and 90-year-old dads that won't turn the business over to a 60-year-old son or a 50-year-old son. And the reason most of the time that it happens is because they saw their neighbor do it, and the neighbor died within a year or two. And the reason they died is because they lost purpose. They had no reason to get out of bed and go do anything because they weren't in charge anymore. They didn't have a position there. There was no, really good purpose to move forward. And so with that, what my feeling is it's not a feeling. I know that it's not just applicable to agriculture. It's any business out there. You take a CEO that retires from a Fortune 500 company and thinks, okay, I'm going to golf every day. Well, within a week, he's bored out of his mind. And if he doesn't find something to do, he's going to veg and he's going to die. And so what my purpose is, let's figure out this next chapter together, and let's be creative about it, and let's do some things that, as far as I'm concerned, that next chapter ought to be the best chapter ever. Mm-hmm. And so let's make it the best, and let's figure out what we need to do to make it the best. And so, Abraham Lincoln had at least is credited to this quote, and the best way to predict your future is to create it. And I think that's true to us today, in your situation with your cows and your livestock and your ranch, and anybody that's listening to us, whether you're in agriculture or not, the best way to predict your future is to create it. And so let's create it. And if you don't know how to do that, well, find somebody that can help you do it. And that's what I'm doing with a group of people. And we're just people that are thought leaders, that are not negative people. They're not stuck in boxes. They're open to ideas, and they're exploratory. They're creative, and they're a great bunch of people to be around. And so that's where I choose to spend my time and my energy. And I will always work with ranchers as part of that, but not exclusively like I did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. How do folks get your book?
It's on Amazon. You can go on Amazon and get it. I actually have a landing page for the book, beyondbusinesssuccess.com. You can go there. I've got a website, allancrockett.com. You can go on the website. There's a link to get the book there. So if you want a free digital copy, PDF copy, get on the website and request that, and we'll send it to you.
Okay.
But if you want the actual hard copy, you can go on Amazon or go to the website, and the link will take you to Amazon to get the book.
All right. We'll put a link in our show notes too on that too, Allan. So, Allan, good to visit with you as always. We could go for another 30 minutes easily, but always good to visit with you. And I hope for folks, as we just wrap up this year, we move beyond this noise, take some of the stuff we talked about here today and look ahead to 2026. And thank you for joining us today as we do that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, Justin.
You bet. Allan Crockett joining us here on the program today. He is a business coach, consultant for ranches, and now author, as we were just learning a moment ago here about his book that he has recently released, Beyond Business Success After the Exit, What's Next? And if you would like to take and get a copy of that book, you can go to Amazon and pick it up there. Or if you want to find out more information, you can go to his website at allancrockett.com. That is spelled, Allan is spelled A-L-L-A-N, Crockett.com. Well, folks, I know that the tone of our show here today is just a little bit different than normal, but I think if I got to be honest with you, a lot of it was maybe more for myself as much as anything, just because I felt that in the last, not just in the last 6 weeks, of course, that's when the president on his social media put things out there that really got our industry really stirred up. But I think it's been building over the many years. And it's just the fact that of allowing a lot of folks to have the ability to get things out in various mechanisms that express opinions and ideas. And a lot of times it's very emotionally charged, emotionally driven, and not very factual to some extent. Maybe there's bits and pieces of it, but really brings a lot of emotion into it. And just for me, for myself, just really kind of starting to get really tired and fed up with that. And I think that's where my heart was at with this show here today, is just how we can kind of come back away from some of that and begin to be thinkers for ourselves and not allow the different folks that are on social media that have a tendency to use very emotionally charged fear factors as a mechanism to motivate people into doing things or believing things or thinking things. And that's just where really a lot of this is stemming from. And I think we can do it. I think we have the ability as people to move beyond that and think for ourselves. Do our due diligence and do the hard thing out there is to go and actually maybe try to find some facts to back up what we are saying or what we think we believe. And if we take that time to diligently do that, I think it'll make us better, not only in terms of our contributions to society, but also to contributions to our businesses and to our families and to our communities as well. Well, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to take a look at our long-range weather. Meteorologist Don Day will be in, and we'll do that when we come back.
Molly Manufacturing's all-purpose corral is perfect for any farming operation. With over 3,200 square feet of heavy-duty paneling, the all-purpose corral is the ultimate farm and ranch tool for livestock of any size. It's the industry standard in low-stress livestock handling and safety. One corral, endless possibilities. The all-purpose corral from Molly is better by design. Find out more at mollymfg.com.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Today's long-range weather brought to you by Long Range Cattle Dewormer. You know, when it comes to these cattle through these winter months, success starts with healthy, thriving cattle. And with Long Range Epinephrine Extended Release Dewormer, you're going to get up to 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose. One of the ways we can help these cattle get through these winter months is through reducing the amount of parasite pressure that they have to contend with to maintain their body score and condition. If you'd like to find out more about Long Range Cattle Dewormer, go to their website at longrangedewormer.com. Well, as we turn now and take a look at our long-range weather, joining us is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, as we look ahead for the next couple of weeks, one of the things it looks like it's a similar pattern where the weather's coming in. We see a lot of stuff coming in, starting at the northwestern part of the country and moving diagonally across the country. And it really is setting up that northern part of the United States. If we look at Montana, North Dakota, really going to get hammered.
Yeah, the Northern Rockies and the Northern Plains are in a position to have two things come together to bring a lot of winter weather. One, if you want a lot of winter, you got to have the cold, and the northern tier of the U.S. is going to be open to the Arctic several times here in the coming weeks. And we're also seeing a lot of stormy weather off the coast of British Columbia and the Gulf of Alaska, wanting to ride along the U.S.-Canadian border. So that's going to make for a very active area of, we'll just call them air mass collisions. Pacific meeting the Arctic, and boy, the end result when you put those two together is episodes of snow and cold. And what also is going to be happening is as those systems move across the northern plains, some of them are going to sink southeast and will affect into the northern and northwestern areas of the Corn Belt and the Great Lakes, then eventually up into the northeastern United States, bringing plenty of winter weather. So the wintry weather is going to definitely favor through mid-month the northern tier of the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is a switch that's going to happen a little bit later where we're going to see maybe some of that, the jet stream switches a little bit, and it's going to allow for some pretty cold weather coming in. But it's also, I see, really going to be a pretty different, quite a bit different change of the jet stream pattern than what we have experienced here lately. Explain when that's going to happen and who that's going to affect the most.
Yeah, so in the higher latitudes, one thing that we saw develop right over Thanksgiving week and into the first week of December was we call it the polar vortex that was really getting itself well organized over Hudson Bay. Now, since then, that vortex of very cold air is split into several smaller areas of colder air that are going to rotate around the northern hemisphere. And when you get a splitting of the vortex like that, you tend to have multiple storms possible over the northern hemisphere at the same time instead of, just one or two major systems. So what that does is that allows a lot of weather to happen, whether it's across Canada, a good part of the U.S., but also parts of Europe as well. And then you tend to see, and this is something I think that we're going to see between just before Christmas and New Year's, is the opportunity for some of those cold waves to not necessarily be over east central Canada, but further westward, whether that's parts of Alaska, the western parts of Canada, then slipping into the western parts of the United States. It really promises to be, from what we're seeing, a very busy month of December and into the new year.
All right. We've talked where a lot of this is going to be kind of the northern tier of the country, seeing a lot of the snow and the extreme cold. How far south are we talking into the southern plains and then that part of the country?
Well, what we're going to see are occasional forays further south of the winter weather. Right now, we've already seen here over the last couple of weeks, the Interstate 80 corridor, the I-90 corridor areas are the southern extent of the wintry weather. And I think that's what we're going to see. But when we get to the end of the month into the new year, some of those penetrations will go further south. Texas, Oklahoma, into the lower Mississippi Valley areas are going to experience some of that colder weather. We also may see some episodes of cold get into central and southern California, parts of the Great Basin states as well.
Okay, Don. Well, we appreciate the update, and sounds like we got our hands full here for the next few weeks here and into the first of the year.
Yeah, we're certainly not going to be bored with the weather, that's for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you.
And again, that is meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-range weather. Now, if you'd like to follow along with him each and every morning through his daily video podcast, you can do that. If you go to his website, there's a link there on his website. Also, maybe you're looking at some weather instruments, some things like that. He's got some of those kinds of things on his website as well. A lot of things you can do there. But, of course, there's also the link to his daily video podcast. You can follow along. Tune in each and every morning to what he's doing and what he's looking at on the weather front this time of the year. A lot of us have a pretty keen eye on what's going on there, so I appreciate him joining us here this week as he does each and every week on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Well, stay with us. We'll put a wrap on this week's show when we come back. All right, ranchers, here's a question for you. How many of you are making six-figure decisions without knowing what part of your operation is actually making you money? You know, when you got various different enterprises you're looking at and you're juggling things like maybe a cow-calf enterprise or a yearling outfit or backgrounding or a haying outfit or custom grazing, then you throw family partners in, all of that. I can tell you, spreadsheets and QuickBooks won't show true profitability or even keep inventory straight. With Ambrook, you're going to get real-time enterprise-level clarity. And what I mean is cost per head, per acre, or per enterprise, plus ag-specific inventory management for feed, inputs, and livestock. You can tag transactions right there on your phone and get same-day balance sheets and instantly see what's profitable and what's bleeding you dry. Try it for 1 month at ambrook.com/ranch. Again, that's ambrook.com/ranch.
Raising and feeding cattle is a high-stakes game. Respiratory disease only raises the risks. Choosing Resflor Gold, Florfenicol, and Flunixin Meglamine from Merck Animal Health as your BRD treatment helps shift the odds. The fast-acting dual therapy reduces fever and fights infection at the source for visible recovery within 6 hours. Don't gamble with BRD. Bet on gold. Learn more at resflorgold.com. Animals intended for human consumption must not be slaughtered within 38 days of treatment. This product is not approved for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older, including dry dairy cows.
Hey, you know, I've always been an advocate that we need to be involved in our statewide and our national organizations. Get our hands dirty. Be a part of that process. I think not only is it educational, but we can be the advocate for our industry at the statewide, national levels that we need to be. But with that in mind, I know for a lot of you folks, you probably had your statewide meetings at your industry organizational groups. Maybe for a few of you, like myself, yours is coming up. But nevertheless, when we turn the calendar and look into 2026, a lot of the national organizations will be having their meetings. In fact, when I look on the calendar here, I see where the American Farm Bureau Federation will be having their annual convention January 9th through the 14th. And this year, they're going to be in Anaheim, California. Then the U.S. Cattlemen's Association having their annual meeting. This year, they're going to be meeting in Manhattan, Kansas. That's going to be January 20th through the 23rd. Now, when we look into February, the 2026 Cattle Convention this year is going to be held in Nashville, Tennessee. That'll be February 3rd through the 5th. And then the following week, the Society for Range Management will be having their annual meeting in Monterey, California. This year, that is going to be held February 7th through the 11th. And finally, into March, the National Farmers Union having their 124th annual convention in New Orleans, Louisiana. This year, they're meeting March 7th through the 9th. And of course, all of these industry organizations do have their respective websites where you can go and find out all of the details about their upcoming conventions, host hotels, the agenda for everything going on. Head to their websites if you'd like more information about their respective annual conventions. Well, one thing I wanted to pass along here, more of a shout out in light of our conversation that we had here today with Allan Crockett and kind of moving away. How do we get rid of some of the negativity stuff that we see on social media? Well, there are things on social media that do make you smile. And this is one that made me smile the other day when I saw it. I want to shout out here today to Hanson's Dairy out of Hudson, Iowa. I encourage you to go check their Facebook page out, Hanson's Dairy, Hudson, Iowa. They put a post out there on the 1st of December. And if anybody's ever watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation when Cousin Eddie is emptying the RV sewer, well, there's kind of a post of that that's similar to that. It was funny, made me laugh, so I thought I'd give a shout out here today to Hanson's Dairy in Hudson, Iowa. Well, we thank you for joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. It is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. If you'd like to get a hold of me, send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.